Senator Little.
Thank you. Well, I rise to speak in support of the Northern Territory Safe Measures Bill 2023. What more proof do you need that the Federal Parliament, the taxpayers of Australia, Central Australia, Barkly and top-end residents should not trust the Northern Territory Government? Even the most vulnerable people in the NT surely have endured and experienced enough. On a recent trip to Central Australia, I heard a resounding and reverberating message. The message was of bringing to an end the failed service delivery and poor outcomes they've seen delivered by the NT Government and service providers, government, non-government and private providers. They're not referring to all of them, but the names of the organisations and their leaders they are referring to come up often. Time for some truth-telling. The people of the Northern Territory will make their choice in an election in 2024, but what I'm talking about is the Commonwealth intervening and protecting its interests where it has the responsibility and ability to do so. The Albanese Labor government has, as it does, been blinded by ideology and political posturing that saw it not intervene until the tide of public opinion left it with little choice and the media doggedly maintained its focus on their failure. What more proof do we need? It was the Northern Territory Government that spectacularly sacrificed the right to safety, the right to live free from harm and the right to go about their everyday lives to prioritise what the NT Attorney-General lauded was human rights, the consequences of which will be felt for some time and for some people forever. The end of Stronger Futures legislation and its alcohol restrictions without an appropriate transition plan prioritised the rights of addicts and abusers over that of residents, men, women and children, the human rights of everyday Territorians, just trying to go about their everyday lives. No accountability, no responsibility, no idea, and it seems no consequences. The NT leadership is the same. The accountability sits with the same people who triggered the chaos. They remain in charge of the Treasury benches and the programs funded by the rivers of taxpayers' money to respond, in not small part, to an issue largely of their own making. Despite warning of what would happen, despite immediate confronting evidence of the consequences, it still took around 7 months and federal intervention for a proper circuit breaker. What the NT government presided over was a jump of 54% in alcohol-related assault. House break-ins rose by 22.5%, commercial break-ins increased by 55%, motor vehicle theft was up 31%, property damage jumped by nearly 60%, and when cost of living hits regional areas hardest and remote areas hard, the human, social and economic toll rose to dizzying heights for Territorians. Tourists stop coming in the same numbers, locals don't move around so freely, and many residents have simply packed up and left after experiencing or witnessing ongoing damage to property and or person. To do what they did, to allow alcohol restrictions to lapse with no proper consultation, with no transition plan, and worse, ignoring the pleas of key organisations, is what led to an escalation of community chaos in Central Australia. Even the Commonwealth Agency, whose purpose is to improve the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, got it wrong when it supported an opt-in clause for those who wished alcohol restrictions to remain. There were voices of several key organisations who wanted an opt-out clause, but they were simply ignored. 9 organisations, key organisations who for decades have worked to improve the lives of Aboriginal people in the NT, wrote to the Albanese government pleading and warning of the catastrophe about to unfold. Those key organisations argued in a Senate inquiry that positive discrimination was an appropriate response to protect the most vulnerable and to stop the unravelling of hard-won gains that had been made to close the gap in important health indicators. You can't stand up and talk about closing the gap while not responding to issues that are widening them. The NT government, in the face of consistent warning, precedents and overwhelming evidence, showed no foresight, had no consideration for the most vulnerable, and with no meaningful consultation or transition plan, showed they had no idea. That's why it's not feasible, plausible or responsible to dismiss this bill outright without some serious checks and balances that it asks for. Sure, the NT government has put in place its own legislation, but that lacks detail and oversight. Sounds like a familiar story. The bill introduced in the Northern Territory is the Liquor Act 2019. In its 6 pages, it talks of who can make an order, how alcohol management plans will be agreed to, and how views of specific stakeholders will be considered. The bill lacks detail. Nothing that suggests how it will ensure that voices won't be silenced so that a 60% majority endorsement can be obtained. It is with consultation, I repeat, consultation with police, the government and the relevant local health organisations before approval is granted. I want to know exactly who is going to be consulted. They didn't listen to the most vulnerable or those who worked with most vulnerable people. This doesn't go far enough to protect elders, leaders, men and women who would want to object to allowing alcohol in their communities and ensure their safety in the process. This private member's bill requires a review within 1 year by the Senate in relation to the effectiveness of these laws. It is not seeking to remove the ability for these communities to have alcohol management plans, but what it does is describe in greater detail the framework for decision-making in much more detail than the Northern Territory legislation does. It deserves support. I raise also my advocacy and that of Senator Jacinta Price to get a family with children and sick adult homeless people, homeless for almost 2 years, living on a cement slab in Alice Springs, exposed to the elements and the issues impacting the region off that slab. The NT government had to be dragged into action by the Commonwealth, by the minister and local member to find a safer place, a more reasonable place, permanent housing. But their job is not done yet. You can't take your eyes off the Northern Territory government. Need more proof about the common sense, the competency of that government and its agencies? Then let me explain how it took 3.5 weeks to get that family off the slab. How can they do it, take 3.5 weeks to get that family, and the job now is to fix an entire region? Guess what? When they were moved off the slab, they said to me, you know what? They've told us we need to provide a tenancy reference. Can you believe that? A tenancy reference. They were told they had to get a tenancy reference to trigger the process of securing a greater place of safety. It's disbelief. They have been neglected for years. Service providers, people who should have known they were there, drove past them, and now they want a tenancy reference? I'm talking about a young woman with advanced kidney disease, on dialysis 3 times a week. Up to 9 children and their family were on that slab, enduring 40 degrees heat in summer and below in winter. I invite anyone to do that out the front one night. There was no running water, no sanitation, just beds made up neatly on a concrete slab each day, while 6 of the 9 children who were school age went to school. I can say that because I wasn't 1,000 kilometres away, 2,000 kilometres away. I saw it for myself. There was no running water, no sanitation, just unbelievable in the middle of Australia. They were non-drinking, non-gambling, and they still have to mount a case of being a responsible family. And last night, it continues. You can't take your eyes off the Northern Territory government, I say again. Instead of sending social workers, financial counsellors, the support they need to set themselves up for success, to build a better life themselves, they don't need government to do that for them. They just need the things that allow them to do it themselves. They were told Centrelink's coming to build them $500 a week for their stay. Right from the very beginning, the only people that have been telling the truth about what's going on in the argy-bargy of negotiations between government and service providers about how to respond to these people is those people. Miranda, Bessie and Kate are their names. Real people just trying to do their best. So, why doesn't Centrelink say, look, we're coming out to check that you're all on the right payments, that you're getting the right money to support your family, giving them an update on a more permanent housing outcome, and making sure they don't go broke while they're in temporary housing. They wear the same clothes every day. They're coming from a slab trying to build a future for themselves. And now they're being asked to pay that kind of money while they transition, wait for the Northern Territory Government and others to make sure that they follow through on what they say they were going to do, provide a better future for them. I would say to Minister Burney, it's a backflip when I'm told their accommodation in a government statutory facility, Aboriginal Hostels Limited, will be covered until they are permanently housed. That gave me and them some comfort, and should give all Australians some comfort, that at least the effort is being put in to find them a permanent place, that action is actually happening so that they can get on with improving their own lives. You can't take your eyes off this. If you are serious about confirming greater safety for women in the Northern Territory, then you have to also tell the Women's Domestic Family Violence Services, give them some comfort that their funding will continue. It's a little over 12 weeks before the end of the financial year, and they don't know if in the middle of a crisis for women, children and the elderly that they've got funding to continue their important work, or that they've got increased funding to continue their important work. Stop talking about it. Stop putting those services and the people that rely on them at risk, and confirm their future funding. These are the reasons why it's not possible to support this bill, given the weight of evidence against leaving the Northern Territory Government to get this right. These are real examples. They're not made up. I'm happy for people to challenge it, and I'm happy to provide the evidence. You can't take your eyes off the Northern Territory Government. You can't take your eyes off these situations, and we can't take our eyes off the Albanese Labor government in doing the right thing and not just talking about it, but making a difference, a real difference, to the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. That's why I support this bill.
Thank you,